Welcome back to another episode of True Crime with Tiff Kline, giving criminals the disrespect they deserve. I've been giving a lot of disrespect to others on my other podcast. My newest podcast, Turning the Corner, starts with a K, not a C. It is my newest podcast about cheating, deceit, abuse, domestic violence, not-for-profits, nonprofits, missing persons, narcissism, and more. If you'd like to follow, it is available on all your favorite streaming platforms. Again, that's Turning the Corner with a K. Now, tonight we're back with Season 3, Episode 7, and this is a case that has taken the reins. A case that's very close to home, no pun intended, in an area where I grew up in southern Ohio. In Vinton County 16, hidden in plain sight. That is tonight's episode. Again, this is True Crime with Tiff Kline, giving criminals the disrespect they deserve. And tonight we're going to be giving the Vinton County family much disrespect. Picture it. Vinton County, Ohio, the smallest and one of the poorest counties in the state. Much like a little town I grew up in Manchester, Ohio, just one traffic light, one grocery store, and miles of isolated Appalachian terrain. Now, I grew up in a very rural area in southern Ohio, in the poorest county in the state of Ohio. I could see Kentucky from my front porch. I grew up on a beautiful farm, beautiful home, and when I say miles of isolated Appalachian terrain, we lived on 1,100 acres. The nearest Walmart was 20 minutes away. We had one McDonald's in the county at one point, one liquor store, one Walmart in one county, okay? So I'm trying to paint you a picture here. On June 30th, 2026, this quiet rural community of Vinton County, Ohio, became the center of a national nightmare. 16 children, ages 1.5 to 18, discovered living in deplorable, squalid conditions, hidden away inside a small room in a home in the village of Hamden, Ohio. 4 adults, Gary Siders Sr., who was 73, Christina Siders, 67, Gary Siders Jr., 36, and his wife, Elizabeth Siders, 33, were arrested and charged with 16 counts of felony child endangerment. Ohio's Attorney General Andy Wilson called the case pure evil. Now, again, I grew up about an hour and a half from Hamden, Ohio. I know where this is. I drove around it or through it many times to get to Columbus or to Pennsylvania on my travels. If you lived in southern Ohio, you know how isolated this is. So people can say all they want that, how did nobody ever see this happen? When you live in the middle of nowhere and your neighbors don't really bother you, it's pretty simple. So today we're breaking down every timeline, every update, every name in the broader systematic failures that allowed this to happen. June 30th, 2026, deputies with the Vinton County Sheriff Office executed a search warrant on the Siders' home in Hamden. The warrant was for an unrelated case, but what they found changed everything. Inside a small room, 16 children were discovered, hidden, malnourished, and living in conditions. Ohio's Attorney General described this as deplorable. Some children were unable to speak, and others required immediate hospitalization due to the severity of the living conditions. Authorities confirmed that these children ranged from 1.5 to 18. Now, I have a degree in child and family services. There is a reason I do not work in the field of child and family services. As I took classes, I quickly realized that a social worker can only do so much until there's red tape, and then the state has to step in. I couldn't go to these houses, see these conditions that these families live in, and leave kids there with neglect, abuse, bugs, feces, deplorable, hideous conditions, and sleep at night. There's no way. I'd have been in jail for removing them myself from those homes. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night in peace knowing that I'd left kids in homes like this. Now, there are good social workers out there, but the majority of them look the other way because they have no other choice. They can only do so much, and for them, it's just a job. They get to a point where they're defeated as well. They go in, they do what they got to do, they fill out the paperwork, they check the boxes, and on to the next. And so many kids have been failed from the system. So many kids have been murdered because of the system. So many kids have been through neglect and horrible, horrible abuse because of the system, overlooking, not catching everything, not being thorough enough, not repeating appearances enough, getting these cases get pushed aside, forgotten about. I did my internship at an equine-assisted psychotherapy program, and I watched these kids come in from loss and trauma. And the behavioral specialist would throw me boxes and files, and I would have to read these cases that these kids went through. The trauma, the torment, the neglect, the abuse from their own parents. And when you thought one was just, you read it all and it was the worst, then you read another file that's 10 times as worse. And it got to a point where it really affected me. And I said, I can't do this forever. I can't go into these homes. As much as I want to be an advocate for kids, I'm strong, but I'm not that strong to be able to walk away checking a box and saying that's my job. I did what I could. I just can't. So I knew that I couldn't end up working in that field because I wasn't programmed and robotic enough to just turn it off. I'm an empath, so every case I would have taken personal. I would have removed those kids myself from those homes, and I probably would have been in jail. So this case really got to me because I was picturing myself dealing with this, having to be a social worker or somebody on a team to have to help these kids, seeing the conditions they lived in, the aftermath. And it broke my heart because there was no excuse for this. There was no reason. And these kids were dragged across 4 counties and not one adult helped. Not one adult. They were filmed by every single person. Now, a lot of them were hidden and never known about. But why weren't there doctor appointment follow-ups and check-ins? How come nobody asked questions? On June 30th, all 4 adults in the home were arrested and charged with 16 counts of felony child endangerment. So again, we have the parents, Gary Siders Jr., who's 36. We have Elizabeth Siders, age 33. We have Gary Siders, age 73, and Christina Siders, age 67. Now, I saw on a YouTube report the other day that there were some family members of these people who were on the news saying, just because they're related to us doesn't mean we're like them. They weren't always like this. They have other daughters who are upstanding citizens in society and they're actually successful. They weren't always like this, but it happens at some point. Something happened somewhere. There was some kind of mental illness and abuse and coercive control and issues in this home. It didn't just arise out of nowhere. So there was a marriage history of Gary Jr. and Elizabeth. They were married in 2008 in Mason County, West Virginia, when Gary Jr. was 18, but Elizabeth was 15. Now, everybody online's losing their shit. They're like, how did this is her parents' fault. They should be accused too. Guys, in those southern states, they don't look at the law like most states do. They're more lenient on things, especially when it comes to marriage like this. If her parents signed the papers and approved it, there's nothing they can do. The judge honored it in the eye of the law, right? So they followed the law. They had a parents' approval. Now, should have they done it? No, but by law, they were allowed to sign their daughter over to an 18-year-old man. They were living in Gallia County, Ohio at the time. The detail that this reignited statewide debate about Ohio's child marriage laws, which until 2019 allowed marriage at any age with parental consent. I'm going to say that one more time. This detail has reignited statewide debate about Ohio's child marriage laws, which until 2019 allowed marriage at any age with parental consent. I lived in Ohio and I didn't know this. The Columbus Dispatch located birth records showing many of the 16 children were born in medical centers, though one record could not be obtained. Authorities described the home as squalid, deplorable, and unfit for human habitation. The children were allegedly kept hidden from the public, confined to a small room, living without proper sanitation, suffering from medical issues, and some, if not all, I believe are unable to speak. All four adults are faced 16 counts of felony child endangerment. Some defense attorneys have cautioned the public against drawing conclusions before more evidence has been released. Now, they did confirm that Elizabeth is pregnant as we speak in jail. Yes, she is pregnant again. This case is being overseen by Vinton County Common Plea Judge Lena Featheroff Rogers. The lead prosecutor is Vinton County Prosecutor William Archer Jr. Since the arrest, he has debunked social media rumors. There was these rumors going around that the minors in the home made TikTok showing them living there, but he debunked those. He has requested additional prosecutors and warned off the financial strain on the county. On July 2nd and 3rd, Gary Siders Sr. suffered a fall in jail and was hospitalized. Doctors discovered a serious medical condition requiring specialized care. His bond was modified to allow release on his own recognizance so the county would not be bankrupt by his medical costs. What is wrong with him that would bankrupt the county? Like, what are his health conditions? If released from the hospital, he will be fitted with a GPS monitor. On July 7th, 2026, all 4 defendants waived their preliminary hearing. The Columbus Dispatch has filed a complaint with the Ohio Supreme Court arguing that Vinton County improperly sealed search warrants. Several children required hospitalization due to the conditions inside the home. The county is relying on South Central Ohio Job and Family Services state funding. Ohio is preparing to send $1 million to support the children's care. Some children have medical needs, developmental delays, and inability to speak. Ohio lawmakers, including Senate Minority Leader Nikki Antonio D. Lakewood, are calling for raising the marriage age to 18 with no exceptions. Advocates like Frady Reese, founder of the Unchained at Last, say this case highlights the dangers of child marriage. The case has also sparked debate about Ohio's homeschooling regulations, which some say allow the children to remain hidden. Latest updates as of July 10th and 11th, media outlets continue releasing new details, and NBC4 updated coverage at 8:54 a.m. this morning, and the children remain in state care. Gary Siders Sr. remains hospitalized, and the other 3 defendants remain in custody at the regional jail in Nelsonville, Ohio. The county is awaiting that $1 million of state aid to help these children. Additional prosecutors are being brought in due to the scale and the size of this case. Now, 16 children found living in deplorable conditions, and we have defendants Gary Siders Sr., Christina Siders, Gary Siders Jr., and Elizabeth Siders. There's a lot going on here. I have a lot of questions. I want to know, someone managed to be pregnant 21 times in 21 years, always seen pregnant, but not one person ever questioned where their kids were or never saw kids with them. And then I think I read that 1 or 2 of the kids had been seen out in public with them when they go into the grocery stores at night. What the hell? And this is a question that most people have asked me. What the hell was her parents thinking allowing her to get married into this family? Well, again, in southern states like Ohio, Virginia, Kentucky, etc., these things are a thing. This is real. This is not a weird circumstance. Parents can sign their kids off to get married if they're a minor. Clearly, Ohio is looking into that to change it to 18, but I personally believe Elizabeth was a victim and groomed herself. I believe she was trafficked into this. I believe that possibly her parents sold her off. That's my guess. Could be wrong. And I think she's been sexually abused, mentally and emotionally and physically abused this whole time. Keeping her pregnant is a form of control. She loves her kids. And a lot of people say, well, she had every chance and opportunity to leave. Why didn't she just tell somebody when they were out at the store? Do you guys remember Elizabeth Smart, the girl who disappeared for 9 months and was held hostage and had multiple times she could tell people and she was too afraid? Yeah, it's kind of like that, where you are so afraid for your life to tell the truth because they probably threatened her and her kids. If you tell anybody, if you try to sneak away, we will take your life and your kids. She was seen and not heard. And because she dealt with this for so long, it became normal. She depended on them. She depended on her abusers. It's Stockholm Syndrome. She's trauma bonded. And I don't think she voluntarily wanted to have that many kids. I mean, especially in living conditions like that. I feel like some of those kids aren't her husbands, but the grandfathers. I feel like the grandmothers sat back and watched the abuse happen. I think they're all fucked up individuals. But I think the abuse with Elizabeth got worse over time. One of the cops or the attorney, somebody said that when they saw her, she almost had this look of relief in her eyes. Like she wanted to tell the truth so bad and just cry and was scared and terrified and just beaten down and broken. And we saw pictures that she had marks on her arms, but it would not surprise me if she is a victim too. And I don't think that it's just easy to tell somebody that you're being held hostage and being trafficked or abused and your kids are being abused and neglected. This is a power of control move. It started with the grandparents somehow, some way, somewhere, and that's going to come out later. I guarantee you there's going to be files that arise of files of children and youth calls that were made on them when they brought their kids up, when they were raising their kids. Their other kids might come and vouch that they were abusive towards them. I don't know. Some of the other family members in the community are like, they weren't always like this, or just because we're related to them doesn't make us one of them. And not one person saw this. Not one person ever saw or knew any of this. I beg to differ. That's what happens when people see something and they don't say something and they look the other way. But my gut is telling me that Elizabeth is a victim. She's been a victim since she married Gary Jr. and his parents abused her, and he abused her, and it's a control tactic. And they kept her pregnant to keep her quiet and to abuse her and to control her. And she probably does love her kids, and she probably doesn't. I mean, you have to think, she got pregnant at 13. She married him at 15. Her brain wasn't even fully developed when she was having her own baby. And she grew up like this, literally grew up like this. So to her, I mean, I don't remember a lot before I was 13. I don't remember a lot after I was 13. A lot of it's a blur. So if she's living in these conditions since 13, this is all she probably remembers. It's normal to her. And you look at their eyes in all these photos and people are like, well, why are they so red? Well, they don't get sunlight. They live in deplorable conditions with probably feces, which they've confirmed, probably rodent droppings, mold, mildew, chemicals, dust. I mean, severe allergies are going to be caused, respiratory illnesses. Who knows if there's drug use? I mean, this is not safe. And they already said that one of the infants, if they didn't get the help they did, they probably would have died because of respiratory issues from breathing in all those toxins. I mean, everybody's eyes are red because they're living in a dangerous atmosphere and environment. So I think she's a victim. I think they kept her pregnant and threatened her kids against her if she said anything. And it's kind of like those movies you see on Lifetime or HBO where they lock someone in a room for 25 years and they have babies and they never saw the outside world. I mean, it's real, people. So I really think it started with the grandparents raising their kids this way. I think it's going to come out in court at some point that children or youth was always involved. Those kids ran out of school. They moved a lot. Her kids were abused. And then when they became 18, those ones that became successful got up, got out, and left and never turned back. That's going to be my thought, but I could be completely wrong. I mean, clearly there's mental illness. It's not how could they do this to their kids? This is a mentally, emotionally, and physically unfit circumstance. This is more than just child neglect. I want to know how the hospitals across 4 counties had her on file, constantly delivering babies, and no one stopped to think that this was alarming and worth being looked into. Or no social workers were notified, no cops, no follow-up doctor's appointments, nothing for any of the kids. Were all the kids Gary Juniors? I don't think so. I think the grandfather fathered some of those kids. Apparently, though, the defense stated that all 16 kids belonged to Gary Jr. and Elizabeth, but the prosecution and child welfare officials have been more guarded, stating it remains an intra-family situation because the children completely lack documentation or birth certificates, and DNA testing is currently underway to formally map the exact biological relationships between the 16 victims and the 4 adults in the home. Now, that's going to take a while. It doesn't come back overnight. Did these public instances that did this take place directly outside the home on Omer Street? And did neighbors ever witness anybody? And you can't blame the schools, the teachers, for this one because the kids were never enrolled in school. So it's not like the teachers saw bruises and neglect and didn't report it. I mean, there has to be calls and reports and tips from someone. And knowing the system, it was overlooked, pushed aside, or forgotten about. And the youngest child being in respiratory distress, like I said earlier, did they not think to ever bring their kids to a fire station or a hospital to turn them over even because they were too unfit to take care of them? That is still a thing. I mean, clearly they were isolated and from society and didn't interact with the world, but they could have given their kids up. I wonder if Elizabeth was abused and told not to help her kids or take them to the hospital for help because she was threatened, and maybe she was just so abused and beaten down physically, mentally, and emotionally and verbally that she just did what she was told. And she could have just eventually become like them and it was the new norm. I don't know. I feel bad for these kids and the foster care that they'll be getting. They're all being split up. They have no social skills, no education, no motor skills. All the kids 1 through 18 are probably on the level of a toddler. How will they recover? Several of the children are nonverbal. They have lived exclusively in a single 12 by 12 room and exhibit behaviors described by police as almost feral. Child welfare experts are questioning what long-term rehabilitation will look like, and they cannot be kept together logistically, meaning the state faces the massive challenge of transitioning them into a world they've never seen while managing severe developmental delays. Think about that for a second. Some of these kids are 16, 17, 18 years old and have never seen the outside world. They can't be kept together, so now they're being ripped apart and have a massive challenge to face to a world they've never seen with developmental delays. On July 7th, 2026 at 1 o'clock, all 4 members of the Siders family appeared together in the Vinton County Common Pleas courtroom. They waived their right to a preliminary hearing. In late June, Early July, state and local enforcement executed a search warrant at the home of Ulmer Street in Hamden, Ohio. And this is where they found the 16 children ranging in age from 20 months to 18 years, including a set of 20-month-old twins. And then they found a memorial for 2 conjoined twins dead on the same day in 2022. Ohio Attorney General Andy Wilson described the conditions inside the house as deplorable and horrendous, stating that the children were in serious medical conditions, lacked basic hygiene, and some were so severely neglected that they could not speak. 4 adults, the children's parents and grandparents, were arrested and each charged with 16 to 17 counts of degree felony child endangerment. Sources close to the defense indicate that attorneys for Christina Siders, the grandmother, plan to argue structural, multi-generational fear within the home. They aim to show that the grandfather's advancing cognitive decline left the grandmother isolated, effectively making her a bystander trapped in a house dominated entirely by the actions of Gary Siders Jr. Bullshit. I call bullshit on that. You know what? They're going to use this whole dementia, his cognitive decline. No. I guarantee you she was sitting right next to him while all of this abuse was going on. She played a part in all of this. Don't sit there and turn it around and say that this is because her husband's decline left her isolated. Bullshit. They've been doing this a long time. They didn't just start doing this last year. This happened when Elizabeth was 13, had her first baby, and probably before that. So get the hell out of here with that. That's the defense attorney trying to argue that to get her less charges. Bullshit. Bullshit, I call on that. They're not going to sit there and say that she was a bystander trapped in a house dominated entirely by the actions of her son. No. This has been going on for 20 plus years. Officials have clarified that this is not a human trafficking case, but rather an extreme case of family isolation. The children were completely unregistered, had never been enrolled in school, and had virtually no contact with the outside world. Public records show that the parents, Gary Jr. and Elizabeth, were married in West Virginia in 2008 when they were 18 and 15. The family has transient roots, having previously lived in multiple Ohio counties, Gallia, Pike, Jackson, and Wisconsin, before staying in the Vinton County home for the last 4 years. Neighbors in the small town of Hamden expressed deep shock and anger. Local retail employees noted that parents occasionally shopped late at night, appearing unkempt, and that the mother consistently seemed pregnant. But the extent of what was happening inside the home remained completely hidden. All 4 defendants pleaded not guilty to all the charges. A judge set their bonds at $300,000 cash for surety each. If released on bond, they are barred from contacting each other or the children and must wear GPS monitors. Why let them out? Why? Each count of child endangerment carries a potential sentence of 2 to 12 years in prison for each child. But you're considering letting them out if they wear GPS monitors? The fuck? Defense attorneys for the family have urged the public to reserve judgment. Well, sorry, I passed my judgment. Arguing that the case is in its earliest stages, no formal indictments have been filed. And the situation may stem from deep-seated isolation rather than intentional malice. The 16 children are currently in the temporary custody of child welfare, and officials are receiving medical official evaluation and care. The criminal investigation remains active. Investigators revealed that most, if not all, of the 16 children were confined to a single bedroom measuring 12 by 12 feet. They spent the vast majority of the last 4 years inside this single space. The room was heavily contaminated with human waste and feces. Standing at the doorway of the room during the raid, Attorney General Wilson told reporters, "I can still smell it. I cannot get the smell off me or away from me right now." No cages were found in the home, but the physical environment was described as worse than typical livestock conditions. Severe medical crisis, the discovery was so critical that officials believe if they had arrived 24 hours later, they would have been dealing with one or multiple childhood fatalities. 7 children were rushed to Columbus hospitals by ambulance, and 2 were critically ill enough to be airlifted via helicopter. But they want to let these parents out with GPS monitors? The children range from 18 months to 18 years old. The oldest child, an 18-year-old girl with severe developmental disabilities, was completely unable to write her own name. Multiple younger children do not have the ability to speak coherent words. Investigators confirmed the family completely avoided setting up medical, financial, or government records for the children to systematically keep them hidden while moving across southern Ohio the last 2 decades. Following the appointment of defense counsel, a clear picture of the family structure and the initial defense strategy has emerged. Elizabeth Siders' court-appointed attorney, Thomas Stoley, met with her in jail. He described her as crying and exhausted, noting her immediate concern was asking if her children were okay and where they were. Now, a lot of people are against Elizabeth here, saying, well, it's her fault. Her kids are like this. She abused them. I'm telling you, it's going to come out that they used her kids as a way of controlling her. So she wouldn't speak out, since she wouldn't run away. They kept her pregnant. They kept her homebound. If she said a word to anybody, they probably threatened to kill her kids and kill her. So that's why her first question was where her kids were and if they were okay. She was being a mother to them the only way she knew how, in an abusive home, in deplorable conditions. I think that's what happened. I think that's the truth right there. I could be completely wrong, and this could come out and she could be an abuser. But my gut's telling me that they used her kids against her as abuse and kept her pregnant for control, and then used the kids against her to keep her silent. That's what I'm going with. I don't know. They're her kids. Unless she's putting on an act, I don't know. But I really think that the grandparents and the husband used these kids against her. Stoley publicly pushed back on the state's characterization of pure evil, arguing that evil requires malice, which he claims is absent here with Elizabeth. He pointed out that she married Gary Jr. when she was only 15 and has known no other lifestyle or worldview for the past 18 years, framing it as a tragic cycle of generational systemic isolation. Dorian Baum, the defense attorney for the 73-year-old grandfather Gary Siders Sr., raised immediate concerns regarding his client's mental health. During the arraignment, Siders Sr. sat with a blank stare and struggled to understand or even answer basic questions from the judge, prompting plans for formal competency evaluation to see if he's even fit to stand trial. Okay, again, here we go with the mental health bullshit again. This has been going on for 20 plus years. You're going to sit there and tell me that for 20 years, their son controlled this whole household, and it's elderly neglect, and the grandmother just stood by as a bystander and watched all this happen, and the grandfather hasn't been competent in 20 some years, and Elizabeth knew everything that was going on, and no, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. This has been going on a lot longer than when Gary met Elizabeth. They married in 2008. It's been going on a lot longer than that. It didn't just happen overnight. So they're going to play the whole mental health competency card on this, and it's not going to fly. It's not going to fly because you have to take into consideration the 20 years that this has been going on and longer that's not documented. What's the excuse then? I'll wait. While authorities initially stated they found the children during an unrelated warrant, court records now show that police originally went to the home to arrest the father, Gary Siders Jr., Elizabeth's husband, on misdemeanor indecent exposure charges stemming from 4 separate incidences alleged to have occurred in May of 2026. All 4 family members remain held at the Southeastern Ohio Regional Jail on $300,000 cash bonds as grand jury indictments are processed. Further investigations and details from the first week of July 2026 highlight the exact mechanics of how the family stayed off the radar, the family's financial state, and the structural safety issues law enforcement face inside the homes. But the primary question looming over the town of Hamden is how 16 children could vanish from society without a single red flag. Ohio BCI, which is the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, confirmed that parents deliberately avoided generating a standard footprint. Beyond skipping school enrollment and traditional medical checkups, they actively avoided registering the children for government services, Social Security numbers, or public assistance programs that require child counts. The father, Gary Siders Jr., worked as a DoorDash driver and took on sporadic gig and manual labor jobs. Because gig work only requires a single independent contractor tax form for the adult, it allowed the family to generate a small income without ever disclosing their dependents or household size to employers or state agencies. So he didn't even have to prove all this for food stamps or any of that. In a surprising twist, defense attorney Thomas Stoley noted that Elizabeth claims all 16 children were actually born in the local area hospitals, contradicting early assumptions that they were all home births. Investigators are currently cross-referencing Southern Ohio hospitals records to determine if and how the births were logged and why social services were never triggered after successive rapid deliveries. That is my question right there. Why were social services not triggered after successive rapid deliveries? The scene on Omer Street was so physically degraded that it posed an immediate threat to the structural safety of the first responders. Ohio Attorney General Andy Wilson noted that the rot, the decay, and the moisture inside the house were so severe that the law enforcement officers executing the warrant literally were about to fall through the floor at one point during the search. And then you wonder why all the Siders' eyes were red. The house has been since entirely boarded up by authorities, surrounded by police tape, and deemed completely uninhabitable. While the interior was kept completely hidden, the outside yard was cluttered with piles of refuse, discarded car tires, a lone high chair, broken bicycles, a beach pail, an infant car left exposed to the elements. The medical crisis when the children were pulled from the home on June 30th was severe. While some of the children have been since treated and released into temporary custody of the Ohio Department of Children and Youth, details on the most severe cases include one of the youngest children was found in such advanced respiratory of systemic distress they had to be immediately intubated upon arrival at Columbus Level 1 Trauma Center. Doctors treating the children noted that they were dealing with extreme gastrointestinal and skin bacteria infections directly caused by living environments saturated with human waste. The Vinton County Prosecutor's Office has stated that the current 16 counts of child endangerment per adult are baseline. As forensic medical exams of the children finish, grand jury indictments are expected to bring significantly heavier individual felony charges. As investigators dig deeper in the family's background, several critical puzzle pieces regarding past warnings and the logistics of how this went unnoticed are coming to light. New details from the Vinton County Sheriff's Office paint a stark picture of the physical setup of the home, which was tiny. It was a 5-room, one bathroom house, and the 16 children packed into that single 12 by 12 foot room included an incredibly high concentration of very young children. Among them were these separate set of twins, a set of 4-year-olds and 2-year-olds and 1-year-olds. 3 separate sets of twins, ladies and gentlemen. Court records officially list the ages of the children as 18, 16, 15, 14, 13, 11, 10, 8, 6, 5, 4, 2, and 1. The house sits tucked away directly alongside a steep railroad embankment on Omer Street, heavily shielded by thick trees and brush. Even though the front yard was visible from the road, the natural geography of the property made it incredibly easy for the family to keep the children completely out of sight of the village's 700 residents. And the legal battle is moving swiftly. Gary Siders Jr. is scheduled to appear in court for his initial hearing regarding the incident exposure warrant that originally brought deputies to the door. Meanwhile, the Vinton County Prosecutor's Office is working closely with the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation to finalize the formal grand jury indictments. Legal experts note that because second-degree felony child endangerment carries a mandatory 2 to 8 year minimum sentence per count, the defendants are facing a maximum cumulative sentence of up to 192 years of prison if convicted on all counts. The scope of this case has also triggered a massive multi-agency forensic audit into Southern Ohio's child welfare tracking systems. Given the sheer number of children involved, child welfare officials are facing an unprecedented placement crisis. Social workers have confirmed that it's logistically impossible to keep all 16 children together. The state is currently working to place them across multiple specialized therapeutic foster homes in southern and central Ohio. Because several of the children have never known a life outside that 12 by 12 room and lack basic social or linguistic skills, psychologists and developmental specialists are being brought in to help them transition to a world they've never seen. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation is currently running a parallel financial and record track. BCI agents are physically auditing birth registries at medical centers across Gallia, Pike, Jackson, and Vinton counties. They want to know if the hospitals filed standard birth certificate paperwork, and if so, why the system never flagged that these children were never again given Social Security numbers or enrolled in school. Investigators are pulling data from Gary Jr.'s gig work accounts like DoorDash to map his daily movements over the last 4 years. They are checking if he used his delivery routes to scope out secluded locations or if he had interactions that could change the scope of the charges. The Vinton County Grand Jury is expected to review the full forensic medical and environmental reports by mid-July, at which point the current charges are expected to be officially upgraded to multi-count indictments for long-term torture, kidnapping, and felony assault. Intense focus from the public and the media has prompted additional details to emerge regarding the marriage of the parents and the specific timeline of events that held up to the rescue. Journalists are pulling public records from the Mason County Courthouse in West Virginia. They uncovered the paperwork for Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders' marriage. They were married on March 31st, 2008, when Gary was 18, Elizabeth was 15. Parental consent was granted because Elizabeth was a minor. The records show her parents, Brian Ray Russell and Lori Ann Raines, and a local West Virginia Circuit Court judge gave legal consent for the marriage to take place. At the time of their wedding, both Gary Jr. and Elizabeth lived in Gallia County, Ohio, just 2 houses away from each other. The documents also note that their formal education levels at the time, Gary Jr. had completed 9th grade, while Elizabeth had completed 8th. She later then left high school after 11th grade. Early media wires drawn parallels to a 2018 escape, which referenced a completely different famous case. You guys may be familiar with the Turpin family case in California, where a 17-year-old daughter escaped through a window to alert the police about her 12 captive siblings. So for the Siders family, though, investigators are conducting a ground-up review to see if any local children's services in Gallia, Pike, or Jackson ever received tips over the last 2 decades, because the family had no contact with schools and shifted locations frequently. There are currently no known prior local law enforcement interventions for any type of child abuse involving these 16 kids up until this June 30th raid. The Vinton County School District, which is the sole school district servicing the entire rural county, released a statement confirming they had absolutely no record of the family. None of the 16 children were ever registered for standard classes, and the parents never filed the mandatory state paperwork to register them as homeschooled. To the local educational system, the children simply did not exist. The state's primary focus remains on the medical stability of the children as the county prepares to present the formal evidence to a grand jury. Viral posts have claimed that Elizabeth was pregnant 21 times in 21 years and was groomed from the age of 13. Public marriage certificates from March 2008 confirmed she was 15 and Gary Jr. was 18 when they married. The conditions and undisputed by officials, defense attorneys are heavily cautioning the public against intent rumors that exaggerate or fabricate timeline details. While early press conference states on June 30th suggested that the family may have been transient outsiders just passing through, BCI has since mapped out their history, showing they have actually lived quietly across multiple southern Ohio counties for nearly 2 decades before staying at the Hamden house for the last 4 years. Medical personnel and child welfare specialists are preparing for what they call a years-long psychological and physical rehabilitation runway for the children. Because the older children have had zero exposure to a standard peer group, technology, or community navigation, the Ohio Department of Children and Youth is treating the transition as an extreme case of sensory and social reentry rather than a standard foster placement. Vinton County prosecutor William Archer has stressed that the initial 16 counts of second-degree felony child endangering are merely a baseline to hold the suspects on bond. This grand jury is expected to review the case soon, raising the questions of how much further the charges will go. Legal experts anticipate potential upgrades to first-degree felonies, including kidnapping, felonious assault, or long-term torture, depending on the final medical assessments of these children's physical injuries and developmental traumas. Those are my findings on this case, and I'm going to say it again. I think Elizabeth is a victim. I think she's been trafficked and victimized at a young age. This is all she knows, and they hold her children against her as a threat of, if you say something, we'll kill them. If you say something, we'll kill you. And she did what she was told to protect her kids. Even though that they didn't have access to the outside world, they can't talk, they can't write their names, it doesn't mean she still doesn't love them. Or she's been in on this so much that this is normal to her and she is part of the abuse. I don't know. And that's for the judge and the grand jury to decide. I have no idea what this is going to end up becoming, because the grandparents' attorneys are going to use mental health against the jury and try to say that they're unfit and they can't be held cognizant. Bullshit. I think the grandparents are the biggest abusers in this household. And I think the son followed the dad's footsteps. And I think Elizabeth was a victim of all of them. And they kept her pregnant to keep her quiet. And it was for control. And I'm sticking with that. That's just what my gut's telling me as a woman. But there are some evil women out there that do evil things to kids. So it is very likely that she too could also be in on this abuse. But something's telling me that she's not. I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. That's all the updates I have on this case as of now. But I did watch some videos on YouTube about it. I've seen some family members talk about it. I saw some of the first responders that were on scene talk about it. I can't imagine what they have gone through and the sightings they saw and smells they smelled and how they felt when they found these kids. I mean, I can't imagine these kids. I can't fathom how they're going to get the help they need. I mean, they have been neglected for 18 years, and there's no coming back from that. They can give them a better home and a better living condition, but their mental state is not going to magically become 18. You know what I mean? They probably all adapt on a toddler level. I don't know. It's just, I think this case is going to move very quick. Obviously, they waived their right to a preliminary hearing, and it's going to go right to the grand jury. And that's when they're going to decide. I think they're going to get a lot more charges. I think more is going to come out. I think the other kids of these grandparents that are adults are going to testify maybe and vouch that they were abused and neglected growing up. And I think school reports from those kids' schools are going to have records that they missed school a lot, or were abused a lot. There's going to be a lot that comes out on those grandparents. Just wait. And Gary, the son, this is all he knows. So maybe that the grandpa did get dementia, and maybe the grandma was a victim of abuse as well. And now the son is abusive towards her. It's a whole fucked up family dynamic. But my main instinct is it was originally the grandparents. Then it was the son. And Elizabeth is a victim in all of this. She kept getting pregnant. They kept her pregnant to keep her controlled and to keep her quiet. I think she may get off the lightest. She may start talking. She might reveal some stuff that gets her off the hook. What's the word that they give her immunity if she speaks? I mean, she might throw them all under the bus and finally admit that she's been abused, or she might be too scared to say anything and go down with them all, or maybe she is an abuser like the rest of them. I don't know, but I am looking forward to seeing what comes out of this. I hope all those kids get the help that they need and the love and healthy environments that they need. And God bless the people helping them. God bless those first responders. God bless community for helping. And hopefully these kids will have a better life moving forward, and these pieces of shit will be locked up forever. They don't deserve to get out. They don't deserve ankle bracelets. No, they need to rot in a cell like their kids did in a 12x12 room. Yeah, give them a 5x5 room, because that is disgusting. These people suck. Like I think I'm more shocked because, again, I wanted to work in this field, and it angers me that these kids fall through the cracks like this. And it's so preventable. But if there was no system to track them and there was no evidence, I mean, it's hard to get mad at one doctor, one nurse, one child and youth, one this, one that, when they weren't registered anywhere. They weren't in the system. They weren't in school. So they didn't exist, So it's hard to pinpoint one person. But as a whole, these kids were failed. But they're going to be looking at a lot of records, a lot of states, a lot of interviews with people. I don't know. I just can't believe if they waited 24 hours, they would have had mass fatalities. I don't know. But I'll stay updated on this, guys. I know this is a case y'all have been following, and I'll try to bring back part 2 as soon as we get some updates. I'm sure there's going to be some this week because it's mid-July. Things are going to start coming out more. In the meantime, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for giving criminals the disrespect they deserve. And please subscribe on your favorite platform. Leave a review. Leave a rating. Follow me on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, True Crime with Tiff Kline, Kline. And don't forget my newest podcast, Turning the Corner. Corner is with a K. Look for the orange and the yellows and the greens. I will be back soon. I have been going through some stuff and I'm not as focused, but I'll bounce back in time. But I just wanted to cover this case because this is one everyone's coming at me for, because I grew up in Southern Ohio. So this was really close to home. I looked up on Google Maps and it's like, damn, like I go right by there. There's a lot of fucked up shit in Ohio. A lot of things, I mean, anywhere you go. But lately, it's like Ohio's just been like, and it's always the one part of Ohio, like Scioto County, Adams County, where Afro Man's from, where I'm from, Pike County, now Vinton County, Chillicothe murders. These women from Columbus just disappeared. Like, there's a lot. That guy in the bar, I can't think of his name right now. He just vanished like 20 years ago in a bar in Columbus. Nobody ever saw him again. I don't know. It's crazy, but I could probably do a whole season on true crime, but just in Southern Ohio. It's insane. So thank you for giving me the time to give criminals the disrespect they deserve. I will see you next time.